There is a suggestion made by many people that we live with that we're not entitled to judge other cultures or other periods in time or just other ways of life in general that we're not privy to all the ins and outs of. It's suggested that they're beyond us. We can't reach out and figure out what's going on in their world. Mary Midgley describes what apparently was a real thing. I couldn't tell you, I wasn't there. But she describes a series, an incident, although she says it's just one of many, where a samurai purchases a new sword. It's just been made just for him. He's purchased a new sword, and the first person he comes across, he comes down on them and does his best to whack them in half with that sword. That's the only way he'll know whether that sword is any good or not, to actually put it to use. And this, according to her at least, was an accepted practice, something that was morally okay to do. Now, I don't think so. Good chance you don't think so. I mean, if somebody came along and was going to chop you in two, would you think, oh, well, go right ahead, sir. That's a perfectly moral thing to do? Well, you might resist because nobody wants to be chopped in half, even if it's a morally right thing to do. But is it a morally right thing to do? I can offer you all kinds of arguments that it's not, but I'm not entitled to judge those people. As I say, usually this is called cultural relativism. Midgley calls it moral isolationism, the idea that you can only make judgments of a culture you know about, a culture you belong to. Other cultures are beyond you. She addresses three particular questions that she thinks should point to realizing this position is wrong. I would like to suggest right up front, though, a fourth one. What culture do you belong to? No. Well, one culture do you belong to? I myself am an academic, and that's a culture. We think differently. We talk differently. We behave differently than athletes, musicians. These are more than just professions. They're a whole outlook on the world, and you understand things in terms of that. I'm also a Southerner, a strange sort of Southerner, but nevertheless a Southerner. There's a whole body of cultures that come with that. I'm an American. Is there an American culture? I once knew a fellow from South Africa that swore there wasn't. But is there then a South African culture? Well, I can assure you there were at least two when he was alive. Culture is hard to describe. Culture is hard to belong to just one of. Therefore, how can I be sure that I'm not judging a culture I'm a member of if I'm a member of so many cultures? Just worth thinking about. Okay, now, Midgley's points are these. One, that the question has to be raised, can they judge us? And by that I mean simply that, is it possible for those cultures to pass judgment on us? And if they can, then why can't we pass judgment on them? Should work both ways. Why do they have a superior position to ours? If they don't, all right, then let us go and wipe them out. They are bad people for doing things we don't approve of, because that's, after all it will turn out that morality means is whatever your culture approves of. And we disapprove of what they're doing in our culture, so let us go and wipe them out. Does that really make sense? Is that really moral? So then she asked, when I am looking at other cultures and I'm saying that I cannot condemn them for what they're doing, am I also going to admit then that I cannot praise them for what they're doing? I mean, again, if I'm going to say the samurai can't go around chopping people in half, then neither can I say what a wonderful form of government they have, or what wonderful agricultural patterns they have been able to construct. It has to work both ways. If I cannot blame, I cannot praise. Two sides of the same activity. And then the question is, what really constitutes judging? Well, the way I like to look at it is this. I think you, sitting there where you are evil. Anybody who look at this crap has got to be evil. I think you're evil. And you should look at me and go, so what? So what? If you cannot judge across cultures, because you are, after all, in another culture than me. I mean, we have some cultures in common, obviously, an interest in philosophy. But there are other cultures you belong to and I don't. So how can I judge you? Now, one way, even across cultures, judging is important, is if I'm important to you. I think you're evil, big deal. I think you made a D. That's important. That's important in our relationship. If I have no meaningful relationship with you, then my thoughts about you are irrelevant. Midgley's proposing we do have something across cultures, some senses of morality across cultures. We may word them differently. We may frame them differently. We may exemplify them differently. But I think I can praise cultures that are practicing principles to which I also espouse. I think they can judge me, so I can judge them. And they can judge me, and I can judge them. And we hope we will make each other better through that relationship. And in the judging, all we're doing is comparing everything against some standard. Now, whether that standard is created by universal principles or through some kind of exchange of ideas doesn't really matter. It's just once we buy into that standard, everybody has to live accordingly. And if you want me to be in your world, then you're going to have to talk to me about your standards. Again, it's like calling a baseball game. Balls and strikes are still something not scientifically identifiable. It's a ball if the umpire calls it a ball. It's a strike if the umpire calls it a strike. But we do expect the umpire to try to call it the same for everybody. So a ball a foot over my head should be called a ball, and a ball a foot over your head should be called a ball, and not the strike that he called on you. And so you turn around and go, oh, what's the matter with you, ump? Are you blind? All that matters is that the opportunity for equality and consistency must be there. If it's followed, then we say moral. If it's not followed, we say immoral. Not necessarily because of the standards, but because reason and logic dictate the need to express ourselves consistently so that others can understand us. That should give you a lot to talk about. Keep on talking philosophy.